I still remember the morning I realized something in my life had shifted, even if I couldn't name it yet. I was sitting at my tiny kitchen table, eating toast that tasted like cardboard, trying to ignore the sinking feeling that had been following me for months. My girlfriend Mallory breezed through the room humming like everything was perfect, but the way she avoided eye contact felt like a cold hand closing around my ribs. It wasn't dramatic, just off, and it had been off for a while. Our life was simple. I worked long hours at a local hardware store, and she bounced between shifts at a bakery and watching her sister's kids. We weren't fancy people. We shared an old apartment with thin walls and a balcony that should have been condemned. But for a long time, the messiness made sense. It felt like we were building something together, slow and uneven. Then around late summer, she started acting like she didn't want to be seen building anything with me at all. Little things piled up. She'd roll her eyes when I talked about my day. She kept her phone flipped face down at all times. She started going out for air after small arguments that barely qualified as disagreements. None of that made her a villain, but it chipped at me, like erosion, quiet, steady, unavoidable. One night we were watching some cooking competition show, and she laughed at something one of the judges said. It was a small laugh, but it wasn't meant for me. I'd heard that laugh before, the one she used when she wanted to impress someone. It didn't belong in our living room. It startled me enough that I asked if everything was okay. Her face tightened, the way someone's does when you hit too close to the truth. "I'm fine," she said. "You're just imagining things." It was such a simple sentence, but it slid under my skin. That was when the doubt started turning into suspicion. Over the next weeks, her patterns changed. She guarded her phone like it held state secrets. She took late errands that stretched into hours. Once she came home smelling faintly like a cologne I didn't recognize. She claimed it was just from being near customers at the bakery, but she didn't meet my eyes when she said it. Still, I told myself I was overthinking. I'd never been the jealous type. I didn't want to become one now. But the distance between us grew like mold in the corners of our apartment. Slow at first, then impossible to ignore. She stopped sitting next to me on the couch. She started sleeping on the edge of the bed like she was preparing an escape route. The turning point came on a quiet Sunday morning. I was sweeping the balcony because the landlord never did, and Mallory was inside on a call. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but her voice carried through the cracked sliding door. It wasn't what she said that got me. It was how she said it. Soft, careful, warm in a way she hadn't been with me in months. "I miss you too," she whispered. My stomach dropped so fast I had to grab the railing. I stepped inside as quietly as I could, but she must have heard the door because she suddenly went silent. When I walked into the living room, she was staring at the wall like it had betrayed her first. "Who was that?" I asked. She didn't flinch. She just shrugged. "Nobody." That was when something in my chest cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet certainty of bone giving way after too much pressure. I didn't confront her. I didn't yell or demand answers. I just nodded and walked away. Because in that moment, I knew two things. She was betraying me. Maybe not physically, maybe not fully, but enough. And if she was going to treat me like a fool, I wasn't going to stay one. For a few days, I moved through my routine like a ghost in my own life. I didn't accuse Mallory of anything, didn't check her phone, didn't give her a reason to lock down even more. Instead, I watched. Not in a creepy way, just paying attention to what had already been happening right under my nose. Her excuses got sloppier. She'd say she was helping her sister, but I'd hear her giggling in the hallway before she walked inside. She'd come home with her hair styled differently than when she left. Once she forgot her bakery apron in the car, but I noticed crumbs from a restaurant that definitely didn't serve pastries. The emotional distance between us turned into something more pointed, like she was daring me to question her. She nitpicked everything I did, how I folded laundry, how I seasoned food, how I breathed too loudly during movie nights. I stopped trying to make conversation. She stopped pretending she cared. The betrayal wasn't loud. It didn't explode one night in some dramatic reveal. It just seeped through the cracks, slow and poisonous. The first real confirmation happened on a Thursday afternoon. I left the hardware store early because business was slow, and I figured we could maybe have lunch together and talk like adults. But when I walked up the hallway toward our apartment, I heard her laugh. Again, the laugh that wasn't meant for me. A man's voice followed, low and playful. I froze, heart pounding, but I didn't kick the door open or storm inside. Instead, I backed up quietly and waited in the stairwell, hidden, until they stepped out about 15 minutes later. He was about my age, average build, wearing a shirt from some landscaping company. Not a stranger, not mysterious, not some whirlwind romance figure. Just a guy who happened to be convenient. Mallory walked beside him, touching his arm like they'd been together forever. When they reached the parking lot, she leaned in and kissed him quickly, like it was a routine. Something inside me went cold. Not angry, not heartbroken, just cold and clear. When she finally came home, she acted normal. Asked if I wanted dinner. Scolded me for leaving my boots by the door. Sat on the couch, scrolling her phone, while pretending nothing had happened just hours earlier. That night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I felt the full weight of it. The betrayal wasn't just the cheating, it was the disrespect. The assumption that I'd be too blind or too weak to notice. The way she'd been rewriting our entire relationship while expecting me to play my old part. I realized she had quietly decided I didn't matter, but forgot to inform me. And that was the moment everything shifted. Not with rage, not with tears, but with a calm, steady decision. I was done. Done trying to fix something she was actively breaking. Done pretending I didn't know. Done letting her dictate the story of what our relationship was or wasn't. But I wasn't going to confront her in some explosive argument. She'd just lie, twist it, gaslight me again. And even if she admitted it, she'd try to paint herself as confused or lonely or misunderstood. No, she didn't get to walk away clean. If she wanted to rewrite our story, then I was going to give her an ending she didn't expect. A quiet one, a smart one she would feel long after she walked out our door, as she slept beside me, on her edge of the bed, facing away like always. I made my plan. Not for revenge in the dramatic movie sense, but for closure on my terms. She thought she was playing me. She had no idea how long I'd been paying attention. The next morning, I acted like nothing had changed. I kissed her cheek before leaving for work, packed my lunch, and waved from the doorway like the same predictable guy she thought she could string along forever. She barely looked up from her phone. Perfect. I didn't need fireworks. I needed preparation. First, I documented everything quietly. I wrote down dates and times she'd been running errands or helping her sister. I recorded the day I watched her leave with the landscaping guy. I noted how long she was gone and what time she came back. Not because I wanted to confront her, but because I knew she'd twist reality if she ever tried to accuse me of imagining things again. Next, I gathered the essentials. I packed a bag with clothes and toiletries and tucked it inside my coworker's shed, with his permission. He didn't know the details, just that I needed a temporary place to stash things. He didn't ask questions. Then I started preparing financially. Our lease was month to month, and everything was in my name. At the time, that had felt like responsibility. Now it felt like leverage. I waited until she was at one of her late errands, then logged into our utilities and removed her as an authorized user. Quietly, no notifications. I also began saving every receipt and tracking every expense. I didn't make a scene when she started coming home late without offering to split groceries or bills. That part actually helped, because the more she slacked, the easier my next steps became. But the real move came about a week later. I asked her casually if she wanted to go to her sister's house that upcoming Saturday to help with the kids. She blinked at me, startled that I brought it up before she could. Then she hesitated, clearly scrambling. Yeah, sure, I guess. Her tone was off again. I didn't push. On Saturday morning, she dressed just a little too nicely for a day of babysitting. She wore perfume she never used around family. She kept checking her phone, waiting for some kind of signal. I packed a small bag for myself and told her I might go run errands while she was helping out, just to kill time before picking her up. She barely acknowledged me as she rushed out the door. The second she left the parking lot, I put the real plan into motion. I went back inside, walked straight to the bedroom, and started gathering everything I had ever bought with my own money: clothes, tools, small electronics, personal items, loading them into my car in steady trips. I didn't take anything of hers, didn't damage or remove a single shared item. I wanted it clean and undeniable. Then I walked through the apartment one more time. Our place looked ordinary, but the air felt different, like a chapter ending. I locked the door behind me and drove to my coworker's shed to drop off my final load. After that, I headed toward her sister's neighborhood, but not to see Mallory. I parked one street over and waited. 10 minutes later, the landscaping guy's pickup truck rolled right past me. I followed at a distance until it pulled up to a cafe on the edge of town. Mallory got out of the passenger seat, laughing too loudly, flipping her hair like she was starring in her own fantasy. They walked inside together, hands brushing, faces close. I didn't take pictures. I didn't confront them. I didn't storm in to make a scene. I just watched for a moment, not to hurt myself, but to confirm everything I already knew with absolute clarity. Then I drove to a nearby quiet parking lot, pulled out my phone, and sent her one single text. Hey, plans changed. I won't be picking you up later. The lease is ending at the end of the month. I'll be moved out today. Please leave the keys on the counter when you're done staying there. Take care. I turned off my phone. That was all the revenge I needed, letting her realize she had finally run out of ways to lie, and that I'd slipped out from under her without giving her the dramatic scene she was probably rehearsing. Quiet, clean, final. I didn't hear from Mallory for almost 3 hours, and honestly, the silence felt like oxygen. I sat on my coworker's porch drinking iced tea, watching the late afternoon sun dip behind the trees, feeling lighter than I had in months. No yelling, no pleading, no performance, just quiet. When I finally turned my phone back on, the messages hit all at once. At first, confusion, then anger, then the classic guilt-flipping routine she always relied on. What are you talking about? You're being dramatic. We need to talk. This isn't fair to me. Where are you? But my favorite one came near the end. You're blowing this out of proportion. That told me everything I needed to know about how she viewed our relationship. I was supposed to stay in the dark, forgive the unforgivable, and keep the whole machine running so she could chase whatever attention she wanted on the side. The betrayal itself hurt, sure, but the entitlement afterward was what really closed the door for me. I didn't respond. The next morning she tried calling, 7 times, then twice more during my shift at the store. By noon, she'd stopped pretending she didn't know what this was really about. Please don't do this. Can we talk? It wasn't what you think. I can explain. Please answer. She didn't know that I had already transferred the utilities into my sole control. She didn't know the landlord had accepted my notice to vacate. She didn't know the apartment was legally tied only to me. All she knew was that I had walked away without giving her a chance to rewrite what happened. 2 days later, I drove back to the apartment to drop off the final set of keys and do a last walkthrough before officially handing it over. The place was half empty. She had taken her clothes, some kitchen stuff, and a few decorations. But the bedroom was tidy. The keys were on the counter, exactly where I asked her to leave them. She wasn't there. Instead, she left a single note, folded neatly next to the keys. Her handwriting looked shaky. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just didn't know what I wanted. I'm sorry. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel anger or sadness or even satisfaction. I felt done. As I locked the door for the last time, I realized something important. Revenge doesn't always look like payback. Sometimes it's just choosing not to play along anymore. Sometimes it's stepping out of the story someone else was writing for you and letting them sit alone in the fallout they created. Mallory had expected a confrontation, a dramatic fight, maybe even a tearful apology she could twist into a second chance. Instead, all she got was the truth reflected back at her. The consequences of her own choices, delivered quietly, without fanfare or rescue. I left the keys with the landlord, walked to my car, and sat behind the wheel for a moment, breathing in the calm. No shouting, no begging, no chaos, just closure. And for the first time in months, I felt something that had been missing for far too long. My own life settling back into my hands, right where it always should have been.